You are listening to Been There, Done That. We present some of the smartest people connected to the business of coffee. People who've succeeded in the tough grind of hospitality by staying ahead of the rest. So join us as we explore the secrets to their success and help you accelerate your business. This show is brought to you by the Coffee Commune, where the coffee community comes to collaborate. Enjoy the show.
Great.
Let's go. Hi, this is Shari Wilding, standing in for Philip DeBella, and you're listening to another episode of Been There, Done That. We bring experts to the microphone, and today is certainly no exception. Today we have Ray with us from International Coffee Traders. Welcome, Ray. Thank you for your time today. Tell us a little bit about yourself first before we dive into what we're going to talk about today.
Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be here. We're talking about my favorite subject, which is coffee and green coffee. So I think that's all that needs to be said. I am a coffee geek. I love coffee, everything to do with coffee production, coffee roasting, coffee extraction, coffee farming. But my role right now is really about helping coffee roasters be the best that they can be, achieve their goals, and help them source the coffee that they really want. That's what I've really sunk my teeth into the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to get in today, talking exactly to roasters, helping them understand what's going on, why it's going on, and what they should be doing right now. So if we can get into it, Ray, so we're going to talk about the global trends in green bean. It's been across the news a lot lately, everything from the actual green bean market to the price of a cup of coffee. Tell us what's going on globally.
Okay, so a lot of movement in this area, but I just want to sort of paint the picture for a second here. In the entire world, coffee is not the only thing that exists. There's other commodities like cocoa and sugar and other things that are traded in large volumes. Coffee is following the same trend as other commodities, and it's been going up a lot lately. So in the world of coffee, green coffee supply in particular, it's a supply and demand sort of scenario. Everything works on supply and demand. And that starts with coffee farmers who grow the product. I mean, coffee grows on a tree. And I think sometimes it's taken for granted that coffee is an agricultural product. Yep. It has to be grown. It has to be harvested. It has to be cared for and processed. And then it has to be shipped halfway around the world before it gets to us in Australia or to Europe or to wherever it's got to get to. So there's a whole supply and demand dynamic that goes on behind the scenes to take coffee from where it's grown to get it here. Now, over the past couple of years, let's call it from 2019 to now, the global sort of situation around coffee has been that supply has been tightening. That means, in general, production has not been keeping up with demand. In fact, the ICO just released some numbers lately on their new projections. This might shock you a little bit. So, global coffee production, every coffee in the world that produces coffee, this year is forecast to produce about 176 million bags of coffee. It's a lot. You can make a lot of coffee with that. But what's consumption in relation to production? Consumption is at about 174 million bags of coffee. So there's not a lot left over at the end of the year. Now, we throw into the mix that next year, 2026, global consumption is projected to increase between 3 to 5%. Production's not keeping up with that. Production is only forecast to increase 2 to 3%. We're going to get into this even tighter supply situation over the next couple of years. That's the world we're living in.
That's consumer driven?
It is, yeah. Yep. I mean, that coffee is being used. It's being consumed in that year that it's being produced. So it's everything from instant coffee, capsules, roasted coffee, and caffeine products, things that are not coffee, because caffeine goes into other things like energy drinks. Mm-hmm. But where does the caffeine come from? It's got to come from coffee as the primary source.
Amazing. And so there's a few things at play at the moment. We're talking about climate change and political environment as well. Talk to us about those.
Climate change. Okay, this is a big one. I did a bit of traveling over the last couple of years. I've been to China. I've been to South America. Climate change is a big deal. This doesn't necessarily mean global warming, right?
Yeah.
It just means that things are changing in the coffee producing regions. And this is what I hear from farmers directly that I speak to. They're telling me things observationally on their farm. It's raining when it never used to rain. It's a bit colder or it's a bit hotter. We're dealing with byproducts of that. For example, when temperature changes, if things get a little bit warmer over the course of the year, even 0.5 degree to 1 degree on average warmer, you find pests moving into areas where there used to be no pests that are affecting coffee products and coffee harvests. You also find some diseases, plant diseases like fungus and leaf rust is a common one. They tend to find them in coffee plantations. And those never used to affect those plantations, but they are starting to now because of things like climate change. So what tends to happen is the higher up in elevation you go, the less pests and diseases there are. But there's also less land area at higher elevations to produce coffee. So those coffee growing regions are starting to get quite affected in terms of the quality and quantity of coffee that they can produce.
Okay. And what about logistics? I know that there's been problems with that. Tell us about that.
There's probably about 8 or 9 different things that we look at in the whole global market of things that affect coffee. Logistics is definitely one of them. And this is not directly related to coffee production. It's just about how you get coffee from one country to another. So in terms of the supply chain, we're heavily reliant on coffee getting from a farm to the port. That's step one. From the port, it's got to get onto a boat. From the boat, it's got to go halfway around the world, from Brazil, for instance, and get to Australia. The transit time generally to go from Central South America to Australia is anywhere upwards of 45 days. It goes through multiple ports, multiple countries. Sometimes the containers have to be dropped off in one city and then transferred onto another boat. The supply chain is quite complex. Now, with things that affect shipping, oil prices, because all the tankers run on oil, fuel prices change if that affects transport costs. We have to factor that into the cost of coffee. Second is geopolitical factors. Let's take, for instance, the war in the Middle East. That's created a lot of turbulence along the Red Sea area. That's a major shipping route through the Red Sea. Now, any vessels going through there are at higher risk of being attacked because of political climate. It's got nothing to do with coffee, but that's affecting our coffee supply into Australia. So the Red Sea situation affects insurance. You pay more for insurance if your coffee is traveling through that area. Or if the vessels divert around and go the long way around Africa and avoid the Red Sea channel, then that adds up to 2 weeks to your shipping. Now, when you're talking about 20 tons of coffee that we're trying to bring in from Central and South America, a lot of that coffee is prepaid. The longer it spends on the water, the more finance we accumulate, the more finance charges we accumulate on it. All of that has to be passed on. So that's not a direct cost on growing conditions, but that's a cost of transport that's just really, really become quite volatile lately.
Yeah.
So there's things like that we're dealing with at the moment.
Yeah. And you touched on risk of transport. I actually read something yesterday that big kind of transportation shipments or trucks of coffee now are targeted for theft.
Yeah. I was speaking to one of our partners in Colombia. His trucks, his warehouse, he employs security on his farm just to look after the coffee, because coffee is like money. It can be sold so easily in growing countries that, his warehouse gets regularly broken into, trucks on the road get held up. It's definitely a problem. And it's something that, if we've committed to coffee, that coffee suddenly goes missing. What are we going to do? Are we going to crawl through the Colombian bush and try and find someone that's stolen our coffee? It's a situation that we're so far removed from over here in Australia, we kind of just go, hey, push a button and coffee arrives. It's not like that on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that you have a lot of contact with the actual farmers. How is things like urbanisation affecting coffee supply as far as, a lot of, it's not so generational anymore?
Yeah, I think there's two sort of patterns happening at the origin level, and it's different in different countries. So I don't want to make huge generalizations with this, but for the most part, countries like Colombia, Brazil, they're still heavily reliant on labor. People going out into the farms to pick coffee and bring it back to produce it. Now, there is a level of mechanization that is starting to improve things, but there is still a reliance on labor. People who have gone out, become educated, looking for better sources of income, means that the labor shortage is becoming more and more profound in these countries. And so the challenge for coffee producing countries is going to be to mechanize more, to be able to be less reliant on labor. But some countries are just almost impossible. You just have to get people up into the farms to pick coffee. You cannot get machinery up there. The terrain just doesn't allow for it. Some countries definitely do. Brazil is very good at this. They have a high level of automation, mechanization that allows harvesting and processing to be done very efficiently with lower labor inputs, but other countries just don't have access to those resources.
Yeah. And is there any emerging markets? You've got your traditional countries like Brazil. Is there other countries that we should be looking to grow coffee?
Look, the reliance on Brazil and Vietnam is actually the second largest producer of coffee in the world. The reliance on those two countries makes up nearly 50% of the world's entire production. So if something happens to Brazil or something happens to Vietnam, there's a massive shortfall in the global supply for coffee. And it means that load has to go to other countries. So traditionally that went to Central and South American countries like Colombia, for instance, Guatemala, Peru, Nicaragua. These are traditional coffee producing countries. In Africa, you've got Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Congo to some degree, a lot of the Central African countries. But what we're starting to see now is a lot of non-traditional countries starting to emerge as viable origins. So let's start in Asia, actually. Asia's a good one. China, fast becoming one of the biggest producers in coffee. They have potential for massive amounts of very high quality coffee. Now they're still very young, but I went over there in November last year, and I got to see the situation on the ground. The government is putting a lot of money into transport infrastructure, into processing stations, into the resources to make China a powerhouse in coffee. So over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of very good quality coming out of China at reasonable prices. Second is Philippines, Thailand. Those sort of smaller countries are starting to produce a bit of coffee, and they can take a bit of load off the major producers if we're willing to explore them. What often lets these emerging origins down is not necessarily the quantity or quality of coffee, but the people that you need to deal with. Often it's relationships that they're not traditional. We haven't got relationships with people or with growers in those countries. So we have to go over there. We have to form the relationships. We have to get to know what challenges they've got on the ground so that we can start to develop these relationships and access the coffee that's there. What else in Asia? We've got Laos. Laos is producing a lot of coffee. And then we think about Africa. Africa's always been Central Africa, but now we're seeing a lot of coffee becoming available from Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and similar thing. The coffee has the potential for very high quality and really good value, but we've got to build the relationships to access it.
And we've talked about this before, and I have to ask the question, what about Australian grown coffee?
Okay, so do you know how much coffee Australia grows?
No.
About 600 tons. 600,000 kgs a year.
Yeah.
That's what Australia grows. Do you know how much Australia consumes?
I'm guessing a lot more than that.
Something like 48 million kilos.
Yeah.
So we only produce 600,000 kilos. We consume 48 million kilos. It's a tiny proportion of what we actually need. So even if we kept all the Australian grown coffee here in Australia, it wouldn't be enough. Australia also is seen as a very exotic coffee producing country by other countries. It's very highly valued in Asia specifically. So a lot of Australian coffee gets exported. It gets a better price overseas than it actually gets here in Australia.
Yeah. So what can roasters do to form that partnership with the farmers on the ground in these emerging markets?
So it depends on the size of your operation. If you're a small roaster and you're supplying a dozen cafes or half a dozen cafes, the ability to deal directly with a farm requires teamwork.
Yeah.
You can't do it by yourself. You need finance. You need transport, you need logistics, you need warehousing. There's all of these operational things that would sink a small business because you would have to put, let's be honest, if you want to bring in a container of coffee now, you need $300,000 and you need to pay for that pretty much before the coffee even gets here. I don't know many small businesses that could do that.
Yeah.
And that's just for one origin. What if you have 3 or 4 origins that you want to buy? You want to buy Brazil, Colombia, Ethiopia, Kenya. It becomes very difficult. So you got to work together as a team with your importer and with the coffee producers, if you can. In some countries, it's possible. In some countries, it's just not possible. So it really requires a lot of teamwork in order to make that happen.
So when you say teamwork, are you saying along the supply chain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me paint a picture here. Traditional model has always been a very adversarial thing. It's been the roaster goes to their coffee trader and goes, I need coffee. I want Brazilian coffee. And they go, all right, well, I've got this Brazilian coffee and I've got that Brazilian coffee. I've got 3 different options for you. Which one do you want? That's been the traditional model. Mm-hmm. And it's always been on the trader to go and source the coffee, bring it into Australia, hold it, and hope that they can sell it. That's been the traditional model. What I'm proposing is more of a collaborative model where we go, roaster goes to their trader and goes, hey, let's work together as a team. Next year, 2026, I'm going to need this much Brazilian coffee. I really want for my customers, we value this kind of coffee, this quality, this particular aspect of flavor, whatever it is. You have your quality sheet that with all the requirements that you want. The trader then can go to their network in Brazil and go, I have a roaster that's looking for this particular coffee. They need this much for 2026. What's available? Coffee producers with that much lead time now can start saying, yeah, I really want to fulfill that. I want to work with that roaster. I can produce that coffee specifically for that roaster. And then the whole supply chain works to supply that coffee.
Yeah. So this might sound like a really silly question, but how would a startup roaster find a good trader?
Look, I think most traders now are starting to consider this sort of model. A lot of traders are accessing this sort of methodology, and they have networks. They've been trading coffee. Some traders in Australia have been trading coffee for years. Google's a good place to start. Look, we're always available to lend a hand. ICT is a very small trader by comparison to some of the other traders out there in Australia. But this is the model that we've always worked off, is trying to help roasters actually get the coffee they want, not just shop off a list.
Yeah. So let's throw consumer trends on top of all of those changes. How does things like fair trade, certified organic come into play as well? Yeah,
this is a really great question. And there's no simple question or easy answer when it comes to coffee. Everything is very complicated and convoluted. So I'll try and straighten out this bag of snakes as best as I can. Okay, so certifications. There's different certifications. You have things like organic, which is really about how the coffee is grown and the standards that the coffee is grown under, in order to make sure that there's no pesticides or artificial fertilizers used. Then you get other other certifications like fair trade, which is all about pricing. It's about the price that the producer gets paid for their coffee. And then you get other certifications like Rainforest Alliance, which is about welfare and protection for the natural environment around the coffee farm. So there's different classifications for certifications, and you have different consumers demanding different things. I mean, there's a whole foods movement, there's an organic movement, there's a lot of movement around protecting the environment. So you got to find the classification that's valuable to your consumer group or to your target audience. But I must say, in Australia, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but in Australia, it seems that organic certifications or certifications in general are not necessarily demanded by the everyday coffee drinker as much as they used to be. Where they are demanded is more by corporates.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be a corporate policy that they must build in some sort of environmental protection or some sort of ethical sustainability into their procurement process. And so they start demanding a lot of these certifications because it's a tick in the box that they need to fulfill.
Yeah, that's actually something I can talk about very quickly. We'll go off track. But Australia is the last country in the world to make the word organic certified, which probably explains why Australian consumers are a bit kind of indifferent to that.
Yeah, you can call anything organic in Australia the moment, as long as you don't call it certified. But
Correct.
But you can call anything organic, even if it's not organic, because there's not a lot of regulation around the labeling of organic products.
Yep. And so, again, with consumer trends, is there a shift to things like decaf coffee, functional coffee blends, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I always wondered if there was a better place for decaf, because decaf's almost a bit of a dirty word.
Definitely.
In the coffee industry. You'll even have some coffee professionals that say, don't talk to me about decaf.
Yeah.
But I would almost argue that your decaf drinker is the purest form of coffee drinker, because they're not in it for caffeine. They're just in it for flavor.
Yeah.
So they're possibly the most valuable coffee drinking customer that you can have. And so I think there is a place for decaf, and I think there's a place even to start blending decaf and create low caffeine blends or half caffeine blends. So I think it's an ingredient like anything else. I make the chef analogy quite often with a lot of examples in coffee, that if a chef has access to this world of ingredients, what can they create? Decaf is just one of the ingredients that's available out there.
Yeah. Moving on to technology now, what kind of technology or AI exists to help roasters make good purchasing decisions?
Yeah, it's we were just playing around with some AI systems before we started this pod. Really, really interesting tool, and I think it's a very powerful tool that roasters can access. The two primary things that roasters can do to use AI and to leverage AI in their roasteries. Number one is with implementing it into their procurement system to understand forecasting and prediction of what coffees they'll need and when they'll need it. There are AI tools available that can look at your historical data, look at your future data, and kind of go, right, this is what coffee you'll need and this is when you'll need it. Here's a forecast for what you'll need. And that just helps with the procurement process. So you don't overcommit now or undercommit later. It's about buying the right amount of coffee and optimizing the procurement system. And the second is actually around quality control. There are systems available now, and they're getting better and better every day, to look at green coffee, to analyze it, grade it, and even predict the tasting notes of that coffee. Wow. And this is just done with like an analyzer tool. It just looks at the green coffee, analyzes it. There is an element of machine learning. It has to be trained. It has to be taught how to do that. But these systems are being done now, and they will be available very widely very soon.
Amazing. So let's talk about the next 12 months. What do roasters need to know now, and what should they start doing?
Okay, so there's a couple of challenges. Short term, which is probably the next 6 to 12 months, there's going to be a general shortage of green coffee just available to buy, what we call on spot position. This is just coffee that's not allocated to anyone. So any trader might be holding some coffee. Spot coffee is going to be in short supply, and the prices are going to be high because replacement cost is really high. So any roasters that haven't got long-term commitments with their traders or with their suppliers on coffee, they're going to find themselves hunting a lot, trying to find coffee. And it could be about finding any coffee, not specifically the coffee that you want. That creates a problem because your blends, your product is going to be varying all over the place. And in a market where consistency is so highly prized and so highly valued, that's going to create a major problem for coffee roasters short term. Longer term, we're talking 12 to 24 months. Stocks will stabilize. There will be more coffee available. But I think generally the way it looks at the moment, prices are not going to ever go back to what they used to be. And I think there is still going to be, it's going to force this shift towards roasters looking more long-term and planning their business out 12 to 24 months rather than short-term, what they've been doing.
So should they start to lock in some pricing now, or should they ride it out? What should they do?
If you haven't done it now, it's almost too late.
Right.
But yes, they should be looking to at least secure part of their requirements. And this is not just something in coffee. Other procurement businesses or other businesses that are reliant on commodities like this do this as well. You look out 24 months, 12 months or 24 months, you look at what your forecast requirement is and you go, okay, well, I need to at least book 1/3 of that or half of that, whatever your risk tolerance is. If you want zero risk, book all of it in advance or as far in advance as you can. Often what happens is that there's a sacrifice there. If the coffee prices stabilize or become a bit more available at a better price, or there's a good opportunity, you miss out on those opportunities. You can eventually pick up on those opportunities, but that's the trade-off. If you want 100% risk-free, then you trade off one-off opportunities. On the other hand, if you go 100% risky, you don't buy anything, what you risk is not having coffee. And you can't roast fresh air.
Yeah.
You have to have coffee beans to drive your business. So my suggestion from my point of view is at least cover part of your requirements 12 months in advance if you can. At least 6 months in advance, if not, go for 12 months.
Yeah. While we're kind of on that subject of not being able to roast fresh air, I know you've been doing a bit of experimenting lately. What can you roast?
Okay, so this came out of some online forums. We were talking about the price of coffee and how coffee is getting very expensive. And so we started saying, hey, what else can you roast that could replace coffee? And so the experiments that I've done, this is just napkin maths, back of house fun experiments, has been with chickpeas, chicory, dandelion root.
Wow.
Those are just the 3 that I've played with, but there's probably about half a dozen other products out there that you could roast and make drinks out of. Chickpeas is very, very interesting. Let me take you through that for a second.
Yeah.
Chickpeas, by comparison to coffee, is 90 cents a kilo, whereas coffee is getting close to $15 a kilo.
Yeah.
There's a very, very interesting cost option there. So chickpeas roasts very differently to coffee. It gets very dark very fast, and you have to grind it differently. So you can't just stick it in a coffee blend and hope it will work. So that presents some fundamental issues with preparing espresso and espresso-based beverages. But if you were to put about 30% chickpeas in with a 70% coffee and make a coffee drink out of it, 9 out of 10 people couldn't tell that it wasn't 100% coffee.
Okay, so you think consumers, that's something that they would kind of take on board as potentially the future?
A chickpea blend. I don't know. It could be a thing. But, I mean, it presents some very interesting cost savings, right? You still get your caffeine. You still get a decent amount of caffeine.
Yeah.
You could play with a recipe that had higher caffeine content coffee to make up for the limited amount of coffee that you put in your blend. There's a lot of creativity in this space. What I really want to encourage, actually more than anything else, is think about this. If you're a 12-year-old and you walk into Disney World, there's a lot of emotions there. It could be fun, it could be exciting, but it could also be a little bit terrifying. I can see, how it could be a little bit terrifying as well. Huge park, lots of fun stuff happening around you. But with that curiosity of a 12-year-old, can you apply that into coffee? Can we just look at it like an open canvas, like we've walked into Disney World and gone, what can we create? And this is the time to do it. When things are challenging, this is not, the traditional models have been proven that they're not working anymore. So what can we do that's different? What can we do that's fun? What can we do that's exciting? How can we break the traditional paradigms and explore the world that we live in, explore the product that we're working with, explore additions like chicory, which has traditionally actually been used as a coffee substitute for a long time.
Okay.
Chickpeas, dandelion roots, who knows what else.
I love that. I think that's really interesting. And you must have a lot of fun doing that as well. So if we take pricing out of future strategy, as you said, it's probably too late if you haven't done it already. What would you say that roasters should do straight away as a strategy immediately?
Right now, I think it's a mindset shift. There's one camp of roasters that have done this already, and they're already reaping the benefits of it. We've got clients that made the shift 6 months ago, and they're in a very strong position now. We've got other roasters that haven't. They're still hoping the world goes back to the way it was, so they can sustain their race to the bottom, so that they can play in the old world. That's not working. And the sooner they realize that and shift their mindset to the world is changing, we need new models, we need new ideas, we need to be nimble and adaptable, the sooner that we will continue to move the industry forward.
Yeah. And so what's the best way that roasters can share the story of the farmers? Because I guess along the process, perhaps sometimes when it gets to the consumer, that gets lost. So I used to be a barista, right? And I used to love telling all my customers about the wonderful farms that we're sourcing coffee from and where this coffee came from and who the producer was and all the intricate processing. And a lot of the time, consumers just didn't care. It's about the person in front of you. And I think, let me make an analogy here. So I'm going to go in circles with this a little bit. It's a topic I love. But what I think really strongly about is there's a place for everything. And people choose what they choose, and they're there for different reasons. So let's say you walk into a burger shop. You could walk into a McDonald's. Are you really going to care about the farm, where the wheat was grown that went into the buns? Not really. You're there for a different purpose. You're there to fulfill a very basic need. You're hungry and you need food. Let's say you go out with your family. You go to a fine dining restaurant by comparison. The burger you're going to get there is going to be a different quality, and it's going to come with a different level of experience. The experience you almost expect now to know a little bit about the background of the ingredients or where things came from. Very simplistic analogy here, but this is how it is with coffee. And I think in the coffee industry, we've often confused a cafe for an education center. Customers are not walking into a everyday cafe on the corner to be educated about coffee. They're there for caffeine. They're there for coffee. They're there for a smile. They're there for a muffin. They're there for a social. They're there for a break from work. Yeah.
They're there for a bit of entertainment sometimes. How often are they there for education? Not that often. But can you do education there? Yes, within a certain context. So I would challenge cafes, not just cafes, but roasters and even importers, to think about the end customers as human beings. What do they need and when do they need it? And when do they need coffee education? It's not done over the till when they're trying to buy their breakfast muffin along with their coffee. That's not when education happens. Education happens in special events, or after you've built enough of a relationship with someone and they want to know more and they ask the question. So I think we just need to really consider that quite carefully.
Yeah. Okay, so even though the industry seems, from an outsider looking in, which I am, seems relatively volatile at the moment, it also sounds really quite exciting, and there's lots of opportunity to, I guess, expand your thinking from the traditional ways. So for roasters, what would be your 3 key pieces of advice to action in today's industry?
I think the first one I already touched on, which is a mindset shift, is just to start considering your business over the next 24 months and figure out where you want to go with your business. Because the way things are now, they can't continue into the future. If you're in that position as a roaster, that you're not sustainable, you really have to reconsider your business and how you operate to make it profitable. Number 2 is to consider the entire supply chain as your team. And if you don't know who's in your supply chain, you need to start getting to know your team a little bit better, because everyone's in it together. We're not fighting against each other. We're all in it together. And so we have to work collaboratively with each other to understand where the coffee comes from, how it gets here, what are the challenges along the way, and to be nimble whenever things don't quite go our way, because it's a massively complex system. And I think the third thing is really about having a long lens. It's about going, what I found when I was in China was people built things for legacy. Whether it was businesses, whether it was a government, people are in their business for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and they're looking 50 years ahead. What can I leave for the next generation? And as coffee roasters, I'm not sure that we always do that in our industry. I'd like to encourage people to start thinking 20 years down the track. What impact can we have? Because coffee impacts everyone. Who doesn't drink coffee? Very few, right?
Yeah.
So many people love coffee. They drink coffee at home. They drink coffee at work. They drink coffee on the way to work. Coffee is a part of people's lives. Even people that don't drink coffee, coffee is still a part of their lives, because when they go out with their friends, they're going out for coffee, or they have an opinion about coffee. There's such a strong health movement around coffee as well, and how to use coffee. So the world is changing, and I just consider, what are things going to look like 20 years from now, and how can we be part of the next 20 years? It's not just about now.
Yeah. And I guess outside of the green bean kind of side of costs, there's other business-related costs that roasters could look at and review to kind of, I guess, offset the increasing price of the green beans.
Look, if the cost of a green coffee goes up by $1, how much does that impact a cup of coffee? Do you know?
Yep. Yeah, so you've got to factor in all of the changes along the way, have some kind of, I guess, calculation model of then how much you should be increasing your prices.
Yeah, so a cup of coffee, if green coffee goes up by $1, the cup price only goes up by 2.5 cents.
Right.
It's not that big. So a $5 increase in green coffee, the cup price, a cup of coffee would only go up about 12.5 cents.
Yeah.
So it's all the other input costs, all the other business costs that add up and add up and add up and add up. And the first mistake that I see roasters and cafe owners make is all of these small add ups don't get passed on.
Yep.
I would like to see everyone get a hold of their costings, understand how to build their products from the ground up. So to make a cup of coffee, what do you need? You need a cup, you need a lid, you need milk, you need sugar, you need chocolate. What does each item cost? And how do you pass it on when those things go up, so that you're not lumping a $2 increase on your cup of coffee because you've sustained it for months and months and months. Other costs that roasters incur, overhead costs, the rent on their facility, maintenance on their machines. Maintenance is a big one. That's something that in this environment where everything is becoming more expensive and tighter, I've seen a lot of roasters skimp on their maintenance, and it costs them down the track.
Yep.
A $500 service fee now, if you don't do it, could cost you $5,000 or $10,000 down the track because something major breaks.
Utilities.
Overheads, rent, utilities, gas prices have tripled over the last 2 years. So these input costs, you have to get a hold of them. Otherwise, suddenly your business starts going backwards and you don't even know why.
Yep.
And I've seen a number of roasters get into trouble because they just haven't got a handle on all of the costs. And it's not a hard audit to do. In fact, we have templates available that I'm happy to send to people, which just go, hey, it lists all the different costs that you can start investigating and you can start looking into and putting a number against. And it's very revealing. A number of roasters I know have done this exercise with us where they look through all their costs and they go, I didn't realize it cost me so much to produce a bag of coffee that I sell and don't make any money on now. I thought I was making money on it. I'm not making any money on it.
Yeah, and obviously that's something here at the Coffee Commune we can help with our members for roasters, is to do things like review your electricity bill, your gas bill, your insurances, your packaging, all of those kinds of things we can help with as well.
Yeah, there's a bunch of opportunities. There's so many partners of the Coffee Commune now that are really, really great at what they do, and they've got special offers for anyone that comes to us and wants to make use of them. Even things like storage and freight. Mm-hmm. We've got partners that have saved us huge amounts on storage and freight, and every little bit adds up. Now is the time to be optimizing things and protecting your business so that, in Philip DeBella always says, in good times, plan for bad, and in bad times, plan for good. Now is a bad time. Start planning for good by putting in the right systems and optimizing systems and getting things right so that you can accelerate out of it when things get a little bit better.
Amazing. Really good advice. Any last words for our roasters, Ray?
For me, it's just explore. Don't forget why you fell in love with coffee, why you got into the coffee business. Too many roasters that I speak to are jaded, they're tired, they've forgotten the love. So I just challenge everyone, think deeply about why you got into coffee in the first place. What brought you to this industry? What was the thing that you wanted to share with the world? And go and deliver that.
Love that, Ray. Thank you so much for your time. I'm completely in awe about your expertise of the industry. You deliver it beautifully, very intelligently. How can people reach out for any questions that they might have?
Look, we're on all the social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Raihaan Esat for my LinkedIn, ict.coffee for Instagram, ray@ict.coffee is my email. I'm sure we'll link to all of that somehow, somewhere. And that's the best way to get in touch with us.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Ray. For more episodes to listen to Been There, Done That, just go to your favourite streaming service. Thanks again for your time. Thanks everyone for listening. And we're just here to help you be better tomorrow than you are today.
That was fun. Thank
you.
That's a wrap for today. Keep listening for more episodes of Been There and Done That. The Coffee Commune is here to help accelerate your potential. We want you to be better tomorrow than today. Until next time, you've been listening to Phil DeBella. I'm the founder and managing director of the Coffee Commune, a place where the coffee community comes to collaborate.